Are you moving into a new leadership role during a pandemic? I want to help you by sharing some tips from someone who's walking in your exact shoes. So welcome back to the Help for Leaders podcast. I'm Stacey Harris. Really excited that you're joining me today. Before we dive into today's episode, click here to subscribe, click that thumbs up, ring that bell, share this video, and I'd love for you to comment as well. Today's episode, I've got Delaney back with me.
Thanks for having me again.
Really excited. She is the Executive Director for the Center for Relational Care, the new Executive Director for the Center for Relational Care. She's a licensed professional counselor here in Austin, Texas. And I just mentioned she's new in her role. And so I thought, wow, this would kind of be fun for me. Hopefully it's just as fun for you. But I think she has a lot of wisdom and even just some experiences you've had in leading an organization that is in multiple locations in Austin with remote workers and another state. You have two locations in a different state as well. And so her organization, I'd say, is small to mid-size. For some organizations, you've got 40 employees total in 5 sites here in Austin, 2 in, is it Atlanta?
The Atlanta area.
Yeah, the Atlanta area. And so it's all new as well.
It's all new. And what a fun time.
Let's find the most stressful season of our entire lives, and then let's step into a new leadership role.
Yeah, why not? Go big or go home, right?
Exactly. So I thought, wow, I'd love to just kind of get your perspective and maybe things that are working, maybe things that you've learned, maybe things that even aren't working, because sometimes we can learn from those as well.
We learn a lot from what doesn't go well.
Yeah. So first of all, tell us about your role. When did you step into this role, and when you've been prepping for this transition for a season as well? So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
So I officially stepped into this role January 1st. So it is very new.
I didn't realize it was just official.
It was just official January 1st. So it is very new, but it was a long, intentional transition. So we've been having conversations about it, at least within our director team, within our board of directors for a couple of years. And it was a very slow, intentional transition. So it doesn't feel like that, it doesn't feel as maybe jarring as it sounds. Our previous executive director did a phenomenal job of setting me up well to step into that role. But it is an incredibly daunting season to be stepping in to a new leadership role.
Yeah, because I would say 3 years ago, it's like, okay, everyone's on site. You get to have those face-to-face team meetings, conversations, even the side conversations. I don't think we realize what we're missing today that was happening in the office when you would
buzz in the hallways.
That you would just have those little connects with people and find out information even on a personal level of what they were doing, and we're missing those little connections that were happening continuously. So now we have to be intentional about those times. And so I'd say, what percentage of your workforce is in person roughly, and maybe what percentage are still working remote?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and an interesting question to try to answer, because we really have embraced a hybrid model. And so people used to all be in the office, and now I would say probably 90%, maybe 95% are back in the office at some point. But a lot have kept some days that they're working from home, or they've flexed and adjusted their schedule. So it used to be all of us in the office, and now I would say probably 50% of our office is occupied or full at any given time.
So how does that feel? Because I know
it feels weird.
So 90% are back at some point, but not all at the same time.
Not all at the same time. So we still miss each other. There are still people on our staff who used to have regular interaction who never see each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's grief there.
yeah.
Actually, as you reflected that, that's accurate. There's grief and we miss each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's different, obviously. And so how has that been as a leader for you to be able to connect with your teams in multiple locations that you aren't seeing on a regular basis? And then obviously the ones out of state you were not ever seeing, but how are you connecting differently now?
Yeah, it's been a lot of things. It's been a learning curve. It's been, I mean, just to be really honest, it's been exhausting sometimes to really try to maintain that intentional connection. But it's also been really satisfying and really rewarding to find ways that are working and to hear feedback from people that they feel really seen, they feel really valued, they feel really cared for in the midst of a season where it's really easy to not feel those things.
Yeah.
So, it's been a lot of things. And I would say one thing we're doing differently is we've all gotten really comfortable with virtual meetings. So we did it some previously, but it always felt a little bit awkward. And it was usually like if I was meeting with a couple of our staff in Georgia, it would be them in a room together typically and me on a screen or vice versa. And now everyone, if we're having those virtual meetings, everyone is on a screen. We've learned how to do it in a way that feels more personal and engaging.
That's good.
So that does feel better.
Yeah. And so trial and error.
Error.
I hear you saying that we tried some things, we didn't work, scrap those, try again. Let's keep going for connection. How can we do that intentionally? And it's going to look different. It may look different from week to week.
Yes. It does, yeah. And I have tried to be really intentional. I don't do this perfectly by any means, but I have tried to be intentional with especially each person on my leadership team, to really learn what they prefer in terms of connection. So I know that, one person needs a longer virtual connection time each week. Another person needs to be in person. Another person really likes the kind of quick audio voice text. Another person is comfortable just texting kind of throughout the week. But you figure out what each person prefers for those touch points and then try to be intentional.
So I love what you're talking about. That's style flexibility at its core, at the essence of it, because I'm sure each one of those individuals have a different preference, a different communication style. And you're listening, you're learning, you're adapting and shifting to your team so that you're able to make those connections. Instead of one size fits all, you're all going to participate in this way, which would be so much easier for you, if we're just honest.
Yes.
And less exhausting.
I have honestly had to, as I'm really trying to monitor for my own capacity, I've had, in stepping into this new role, I've had to say, okay, we may have to compromise a little bit here. So I have had to say with certain people, okay, I know that this is important for you. Here's what I'm needing. Here's what's working for me. Let's find some middle ground.
Beautiful example of style flexibility. Again, it's not all about one side or the other. It is that healthy compromise. But the fact that you learned it, you understood what they need, and then you're able to communicate to that team member, hey, I realize this is your preference, but in this moment with my capacity, this is how we're going to do it today. Doesn't mean this is forever, but for today, this is how we're going to pivot. And so I think we've all learned
the constant pivot.
The constant pivot.
Yeah.
Every day is a new day with new challenges and connection. And so I wanted to talk to you about this because this is the heartbeat of your organization. I mean, your counselors, your therapists, you're listening, you're all about that relational connection. So many of my organizations are manufacturing, and we've got healthcare. I mean, you name it, government agencies. I work with so many different organizations, huge, large, Fortune 500 to very small organizations, and everyone is different, but we're all people.
Yes.
We're all humans. We're all, experiencing a lot of emotion. And if we don't drive for connection, turnover can be extremely high. And you've all seen this in the news that 40% of the workforce has resigned in the last year. And so I don't know if you had a lot of turnover in your organization.
We actually didn't, which felt really surprising to me, to be really honest. Because I think not because of anything that I felt like we were not, doing terribly or any any conflict per se, but I just think this past season has been an opportunity for all of us to reflect on our work situation, our work-life balance, and reevaluate. And so I honestly expected more people to say, I think I'm going to pivot and go into private practice, or I think I'm going to go in a different direction. And we did have a couple people make that decision, and it was the best decision for them and their families. And we supported that and celebrated that with them. But we really had almost everyone stay.
That's amazing. In healthcare?
We actually grew.
Wow.
We actually opened 2 new offices and have brought on, 6 or 7 new employees probably.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that I think, and that is really attributed to your predecessor and your leadership ability to be able to recognize the needs of everyone and really provide that kind of environment. And I think because of no end in sight, we don't really know. I mean, we've got Omicron that's starting to, decline, but there's talks of new variants and this being with us forever and all the things. Being able to lead and transition daily is really key to longevity for a leader. And so I want to ask you one question. So as a leader, what are you doing intentionally to make sure that you are showing up as your best self for your team? What are some things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say, actually, I learned this in grad school, fortunately, before stepping into any leadership role. But one of the most helpful things I learned in grad school was that it is actually part of my professional development to really monitor my own self-care and my capacity. Because if I am not doing well as an individual, I'm not going to be able to step into my work environment and provide helpful support or care for others. And so that has really translated well, I think, into this environment that I've really learned over time to be checking in with myself, to be asking myself, how are you doing? What are you needing? And stepping into this new role, I actually had to take some time to reflect and say, okay, I need to make sure that this is going to be sustainable for me. And so what is feeling sustainable right now and what is not? And what changes do I need to make to be sustainable? Yeah. So I thought about things that I previously hadn't found a solution to be able to delegate, and found some solutions to delegate some things that I just couldn't hold on to anymore. I set a goal for myself that I have communicated to all of my or probably most of my employees and a lot of my clients, that I have a goal this year of taking a week off every quarter, because I know that I need that time to unplug so that I can refresh and then come back ready to lead.
So good. So, and I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're the first female to lead this organization and the youngest.
And I'm not married. And so that's kind of a big deal too. Our previous executive directors were all wonderful. They were older males who had been married for quite some time.
Yeah. So congratulations. First of all,
thanks.
I think that's huge. I mean, I am all for, helping empower women leaders and stepping into roles that were previously just either, for whatever reason, just we weren't in those spaces. Yeah. So I love it that you were there as a single young female.
And I've actually had some people on my staff say that actually has felt so encouraging to me.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So back to that previous question, what are the actual things that you do? Like, instead of general terms, like, I actually want to know, like, I'd love to know some specific examples. Like how does
for
Dawn,
self-care?
For self-care, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I have a routine similar to you of starting every morning with chai. So that is an important part of
we bonded around chai.
That's an important part of my self-care, if you want to know the truth. You also know this about me. I love ice cream. So
She does.
I do. So
you bonded with my husband over that.
Yes, correct. Yes. Shane and I have bonded over that. So I, allow myself to think about what are the things that just make me feel happy in the morning or after dinner. I like to run. I didn't used to enjoy running, but it is something that has become really important to me to be able to unplug. I usually don't take my phone with me. That feels really lovely to leave the phone at home, and it's just my time to be exercising, to be out in nature. I love hiking and being in beautiful weather. And so any opportunity I get to just be outside, either by myself or with a friend, is really life-giving for me.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Those are important things to understand how you really exhibit self-care. I know I love flowers.
Yeah.
I go to Trader Joe's every week almost just for the flowers. I'm like, it's a little bit of a hike, a drive to go there, but
it's worth it.
I love flowers. And I'm like, you know what? It's okay to buy yourself flowers if it makes you happy. I mean, my husband buys me flowers, but he loves it when I buy myself flowers. He's like, oh, you like those kind? Okay, that's good to know. There's just different things. Chai, obviously.
Yeah.
Top of the list. We love the outdoors, so we do some hikes together. But figure out what it is for you. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's listening to podcasts. Maybe it's some professional development. Whatever that self-care looks like. I have a friend that she loves baths. I hate taking baths, but that is her place to relax. I'm like, okay, figure that out. Do it. Tap into that, because as a leader, we have to be able to show up in a way, and that does start with. So I love that you shared some practical things.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up here, I'm just wondering, is there anything else that you would just like to share that maybe you've learned, or maybe it's been a hard thing or a pivot that you weren't expecting in this season?
Yeah, I guess two things. One is I was recognizing, so you sent me an article that you had read prior to us talking about filming this podcast, and I really noticed as I was reading it some moments where I had to pause and just actually kind of grieve how hard this season has been. And so giving myself permission to say, you know what, this has been a hard season to lead was important for me. And then something that has worked really well for our organization that I know won't work for every organization, but we really had to be clear at the beginning of the pandemic about what our goal was in terms of, are we going for efficiency in our work environment, or are we going for connection and prioritizing the relationship? And we, it's really congruent with who we are to prioritize the relationship. And what we knew was going to be a side effect of that is that we're not working as efficiently. We've had to then increase care for our administrative team. So we had to actually hire some more people on our administrative team. We increased what we were paying people. We found ways to give practical care for the extra work that was creating for some in our organization. But we really wanted to value the individual and how they were needing to work. So we didn't say everyone has to come back or everyone has to be remote. We said, what are you needing? What works for your family? Let's figure out how to support it. And through that, we've had people say, I feel really supported and I want to stay. And so that's been really cool.
That is amazing. That is so amazing and so helpful. I know so many organizations that I'm working with are in that same position of figuring out, like they announced a couple months ago, okay, we're going back to the office. And then it's like, wait, we planned that 3 months ago in January to go back to the office when things were settling, it felt like, and now things are not settling.
Up again. Yeah.
And then childcare and all of the issues. So it was like, okay, for those who can come back into the office, this is the goal. This is what we're desiring to, but realizing for some, they may never actually come back to work in the office. They may choose to what's best for them to work, stay remote. And so figuring out those hybrid situations in a leadership role, I know is nothing that we've ever had to do.
No, and it's challenging and it takes intentionality and effort and it's tiring. But at least for me, what I've found is that it's worth it.
Yeah. And even just the statistics that you shared as far as your turnover rate and even the engagement of your staff has really, increased because of those decisions. So well done.
Yeah,
well done.
thanks.
So thanks for joining us on today's episode. I hope you've learned something. Maybe you're leading your first team or your first organization in this environment. It's hard. Realize the challenges are mounting up and it is really hard, but you can do it. You can be intentional. But if you learned anything today is take care of yourself.
Yes.
Figure out what you need so that you can show up for your team in your best way. Join us next week. We'll be talking about more help for leaders. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more information on emotional intelligence, behavioral styles, or communication, I'd love for you to click here to watch more episodes. And we'd also love for you to click here to subscribe so you're notified each week when we post more content.